So here we are at St. John's Cemetery in Queens. After my grandfather passed away in 1932, when my father was a kid, one of his best friends, Lenny Dodone, who happens to be buried right here with his mother, Jenny Mayoni, she was the sister of the famous Harry Happy Mayoni, who was a member of Murder Incorporated, original. Here's his grave, his name right here. Right here, it says Harry, right here. He got the electric chair, Harry Mayoni. He got the electric chair when he was 32 years old with Lepke and the Dasher, his partner. They were the original Murder Incorporated. So he became my father, Fat Andy's mentor and father figure. And that's, people ask me how my father got involved in the mob, and that's how he got involved in the mob, because at the time of my grandfather's death, his best friends were Lenny, who was on the other side, who was Happy Mayoni, Harry Happy Mayoni's nephew, and Larry Abendando, whose father was Frank the Dasher Abendando, another member of Murders Incorporated, who was Harry's partner. And that's how the Ruggiano family got involved in the American Mafia, through Happy Harry Mayoni, who's buried right here in this grave, who happens to be my first wife Alice's great uncle. I married into this family, the Mayoni family, so that's how we got entwined into the American Mafia, through Harry Mayoni, AKA Happy. So here we are at Joe Columbo's grave, Joseph Sr., 1923 to 1978. He was the boss of the Columbo family. The family's named after him to this day. You know, it's crazy because the day he was shot, you know, the Italian American League, we used to protest in front of the FBI. The day of the rally, I was excited. I was 17 years old. I ran upstairs to go to the rally. And when I got upstairs, my father told me that we weren't going that day. And I didn't understand why, because it was strange to me, because I participated in all the protests and the rallies up to that point. And that was the rally that I wasn't allowed to go to. And that's the day Joe Columbo got shot. He didn't die that day, he died later on. I believe Carlo Gambino had to give the okay for that, and my father was in the Gambino family, and he maybe had word not to go there that day. He was involved in the making of The Godfather. If you saw the movie that's on Paramount Plus right now, Joe Columbo has a big scene in it, because he played a major role in them being able to film The Godfather in New York. Very powerful guy. I knew his son Anthony. He did time with my father in federal prison. Michael Francis was very close to him. He became a main member of that family while Joe was the boss. Very powerful boss and a big ally of Carlo Gambino until he refused to back away from the Italian American League. That was his demise. This is Paulie Vario's grave, a very, very dear friend of my family's. I knew him well since I was a little kid. As we all know, he was a member of the Lucchese family, his powerful captain, made famous in the movie Goodfellas. Paul Severino played his part. Paulie Vario was great friends with Fat Andy and Tony Lee. They made a lot of money together. Very, very powerful Lucchese captain, ran the Teamsters out of Kennedy Airport. The Lufthansa, famous Lufthansa robbery, Jimmy Burke, Tommy DeSimone, they were all around him. He's the one that took care of the murder of Tommy DeSimone when he disappeared. He was with him. A very, very powerful gangster, Paulie Vario, a good guy, funny guy. I used to fly out to Missouri to see him and my father with his son, Paul Jr. I used to go with Pete the Killer, another member of the Goodfellas movie. He used to fly out there with us to Missouri. They were in Springfield, Missouri together, him and my father, Fat Andy. So I knew him well, a really good guy. So here we are at Sonny Francis's grave, a very, very dear friend of my family's. Goes back to when my father was a kid. My father had an opportunity to either be with him and his family or with Charlie Wagons with the Gambino, the Mangano family at the time. He chose Charlie, but they remained friends throughout their whole lives. You know, his son Michael Francis is a dear friend of mine. He always treated me well, Sonny. Did a lot of time, framed for robbery. There's a lot of rocks up here. These are all the people that visited this grave. You know, man's man. You could see by the stones up here, a lot of people come to his grave. Another one buried in St. John's Cemetery. The last conversation I actually had with Sonny was at the supervised release office in Suffolk County. We had the same probation officer, him and I, and at that, in the waiting room, he actually told me that he had a great conversation with Joe Carrazza, who was the consigliere of the Gambino family, and that I was on the verge of becoming a made member, that everything got approved. That was the last time I spoke to him until the probation officer came out and separated us. They didn't want us speaking. And that was the last conversation I had with Sonny, was that he told me I was going to become a made member. So here we are at my father, Anthony Fat Andy Ruggiano's grave. He became a made member of the American Mafia in 1953. And I got me here 3 generations of Ruggianos. Generation 1, my nephew Corey and his beautiful daughter, Layla. Generation 3, we're the offsprings of him. I don't know if you want to say that it's good or bad, but you know, we had some great times. He was a gangster. He did what he had to do, but he was a good father. He was a good grandfather. You know, I used to take Corey to see him when in prison, unfortunately. He was in prison when Corey was born. My niece never actually met him. He passed away in 1999. She wasn't born yet, so you know, a lot of time Corey spent with him was in the visiting room in the prisons. He spent some time with him when he got out. And this is the reason why we're in St. John's Cemetery today, to visit his grave and then other members of the American Mafia. But at some point I want to put Fat Andy on here somewhere, hoping to get that chance soon, but this is where it all began. So here we are at Roy DeMayo's grave. So many people have so much interest in this guy. I knew the man. I used to go to the Gemini Lounge with my father and Tony Lee to see him. As Sammy the Bull says it all the time, he was a serial killer. He was unfortunately in the mob. He was a made member of the Gambino family, but he was a psychopath, killed a lot of people, did a lot of damage. The end result was he was murdered himself. His own crew killed him. Frankie DeChico set it up. Sammy the Bull tells the story many times. When I was a kid and I would be in the Ravenite in the 70s, and I would be there every Saturday, and he would walk into the Ravenite on Saturday. He was always by himself. Literally, when he walked in, like the atmosphere changed. You know, like there was a vibe. When he walked in, the atmosphere changed, and he wouldn't stay long. He would come in, he would go in the back, he would talk to O'Neill and say hello and leave. Very dangerous guy. Big money earner with Paul Castellano, one of his main guys, until Paul had enough of him and they found him in the trunk of a car. The only other person that, well, I know 2 other people that were like him. The Lucchese family, Gas Pipe, he was a crazy mad dog murderer. And the other one was in the Bonanno family, Tommy Karate. He was another mad dog murderer. I don't know if they were as vicious and crazy as Roy DeMayo, but they were all pretty much psychopaths. I mean, murdering someone, doing a piece of work is one thing, but they went above and beyond that. The 3 of them, they like killed their neighbors, like they did vicious things. They were vicious people. So here we are in front of the building where John Gotti is laid to rest, in the mausoleum behind me. He was the boss of the Gambino crime family. I had a great relationship with him. I knew him since I was about 12 or 13 years old. Guy always looked out for me. He was a gangster. Started out, as an associate, soldier, captain, and boss. Set up Paul Castellano to be murdered. We all know the story. Always looked out for me, always helped me, looked out for me in my recovery, looked out for me in the street. My relationship wasn't typical. I don't know, for some reason he liked me, I guess because I went to prison when I was a kid. I mean, he always liked me. Even when I was in my dark days, he still looked out for me. I had a special relationship with him as far as I was concerned. So here we are at the end of the tour. Of course, at the great Lucky Luciano's memorial. He's buried in here, the architect of the American Mafia. I was thinking about on my way here, imagine if this guy was a legitimate guy. He could have been like, he could have ran Apple, like a major corporation. This is a man that took every criminal organization in the United States of America and made a commission out of it and made it one organization and actually created organized crime, changed the way we lived. He changed society. I mean, he paid the price for it, but he's the one that architected it. He started it all. He created it all. He created the 5 families. He created the bosses. He created the structure. And he was the first boss of bosses. Lucky Luciano, buried right here in St. John's Cemetery in Queens, New York.